September 2009, Atlanta, Georgia, almost midnight. The Velvet Room was the kind of place that didn't try too hard. 60 seats, maybe 65 if you squeezed. Dark wood walls, old concert posters, the kind of club where the bourbon was decent and nobody expected you to be anybody. She was sitting at the farthest table from the stage, cap pulled low, oversized sunglasses that made no sense at that hour, an old jacket, dark navy, the kind you'd see at a church choir rehearsal, not a soul club in Atlanta. The glass of sparkling water in front of her hadn't been touched in 20 minutes. Whitney Houston had driven herself here. No security, no entourage, nobody who knew where she was. She needed something that didn't feel like a comeback strategy or another journalist asking whether her voice was still there. She just wanted to sit somewhere dark and listen to someone sing. The I Look to You album had been out 3 weeks. Some reviews were kind, others weren't. One piece had been particularly brutal. She'd stopped reading after the 3rd paragraph, but the words were already in her head. A shadow of what she once was. She'd put the magazine face down on the kitchen counter and walked out. She didn't pick it back up. The open mic that night was being run by Marcus Reed, 32 years old, Berkeley graduate, studio work in New York that never became what he'd hoped. Now he hosted nights at the Velvet Room. Technically sharp, well-credentialed, and just comfortable enough being the smartest person in the room. The 4th performer of the night was Kayla Simmons, 22 years old. Morning shift at a coffee shop on Peachtree, nights spent chasing this. She plugged in, smoothed her dress, and leaned toward the stand. "I'm going to sing something special tonight," she said. Her voice was steady. Her hands weren't. She started Greatest Love of All. At the back table, Whitney's fingers found the rim of her glass. Kayla had a real voice. She hit the opening with genuine feeling, moved through the first verse with control. But when she reached the bridge, that specific bridge, the one that required everything, something collapsed just slightly. The note that needed to come from somewhere deep and almost unreachable landed about 2 inches short of where it was supposed to live. The room applauded anyway. Generous. Warm. Marcus stepped to the mic. "Good stuff. Real emotion in the opening, but the bridge, you're pushing from your throat. The support has to come from the diaphragm. You're working too hard for something that should feel like releasing, not forcing." Kayla nodded. She'd heard some version of this before. "Also," Marcus added, with a small smile that the room caught, "if you're going to choose Whitney Houston, you're signing up for one of the hardest vocal climbs in pop music." Bold choice. A few people laughed. Not mean laughter, just the comfortable kind. And then a voice came from the back of the room. Quiet, unhurried. But in a space that size, every syllable landed clearly. "The diaphragm point is right, but the release doesn't start at the bridge. It starts 4 bars before. If you're not already open by the time you get there, the note has nowhere to go." Marcus looked toward the back corner. Cap, sunglasses, that dark jacket. He smiled. Patient on the surface. Something else underneath. "Thank you, but we have a little tradition here." He gestured toward the stage. "If you know this song well enough to coach it from a corner table, come up and show us." Someone near the front laughed softly. The figure in the back raised one hand. A slow, quiet wave. Not embarrassed, not defensive. Just, no. Marcus shrugged. "All right, looks like our mystery critic prefers the dark." Light laughter. He turned back to his list. And then the door opened. Gladys Knight had no reason to be on that street. She'd had dinner plans, but the friend had canceled an hour ago. Gladys had been walking instead, cream-colored jacket, moving slow. She heard it through the door of the Velvet Room. A guitar, a vocal monitor, bleeding out into the warm night air. She stepped inside. Her gaze moved through the dim space and stopped at the back corner. She stood very still. Then she walked back there. "Whitney." Her voice was barely above a whisper. Whitney looked up. For a second, neither of them said anything. Then Whitney smiled. Small, genuine, the kind that doesn't perform. "Gladys." They held each other for a moment. Gladys sat down and Whitney gave her the short version, the girl who'd sung, the comment from the corner, Marcus's invitation. Gladys listened, Her expression didn't shift much, but something moved behind her eyes. "He told you to come up and prove it," she said. "He doesn't know who I am." "I know." Gladys looked at the stage, then back at Whitney. "Does that change anything?" Whitney was quiet. She'd been asking herself that for 3 weeks, whether the voice that had built everything was still there, or whether she'd just gotten very good at pretending it was. The reviews had planted something heavier than doubt. It was the fear that the doubt might be correct. "Come on," Gladys said, simply. Not a push, just an open door. Whitney exhaled, long and slow. Then she stood up. Gladys went to Marcus first. He was about to call the next name when she appeared beside him. He turned, and it took him about 2 full seconds. "I'd like to add 2 names to the list," Gladys said. "If there's room." There was room. When Marcus called them up, the applause was polite, respectful toward Gladys, curious about the woman beside her. 2 women, no introduction. They stepped onto that small stage, and Whitney took the mic. She stood there for a moment, didn't look at the crowd, didn't adjust anything. Just held the mic and closed her eyes. Kayla was standing off to the side watching. She'd recognized Gladys the second she walked up, but the other woman, the cap, the quiet, she still wasn't completely sure. The music started. "Greatest love of all." The first line came out and the room got still, the way it only does when something real is happening. Nobody wanted to breathe wrong and break it. Whitney moved through the first verse like someone who wasn't performing, someone who was remembering, not from a rehearsed place, from somewhere older and deeper. But then she hit the bridge, and Marcus's expression changed. He watched Whitney reach for that note and find it the way you find something you never actually lost. No push, no strain. Just open, released, exactly where it was supposed to live. Sustained, growing, filling every corner of that room until there was nowhere left for the sound, except through the people listening. A woman toward the middle put her hand over her mouth. A phone went up, then another, then 3 more. Kayla wasn't watching the stage anymore. She was watching Whitney's body, the posture, where the breath was coming from, what the diaphragm was doing in the moment of release, memorizing it. Gladys stood slightly behind Whitney, watching her the way only someone who has known a voice for decades can watch it. Her eyes were full. When the last note finally let go, the velvet room held its breath for 4 full seconds. Then a man in the 3rd row stood up, and that was it. The applause wasn't the kind you give an open mic performer. It was the involuntary kind, the kind that comes out before people decide to give it. Marcus stood with his mouth open. He'd heard Whitney Houston before. Records, television, the Super Bowl. But records don't prepare you for the actual physics of a voice like that in a 60-seat room. No distance to protect you. It just arrives. The cap had come off during the song. He could see her face clearly now. He understood everything that had happened in the last 40 minutes. They came off the stage and Marcus stepped forward. He opened his mouth twice before anything came out. Whitney looked at him, nothing cold in her expression, nothing that said, "I told you so." She just waited. "I didn't know," he finally managed. "I know you didn't. Regardless of who you were, I shouldn't have said it like that." She nodded once. That was enough. Gladys reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Old paper, soft from years of handling. She held it out to Marcus. "Sissy Houston wrote this to me in 1971. First time I ever headlined Carnegie Hall. I was terrified. She put this in my hand before I walked out." Marcus unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was neat, slightly looped, ink faded at the edges. It read, "Every voice in that room is fighting for something. Your job isn't to be better than them. Your job is to make them believe they can be better than themselves." He read it twice. Gladys folded his hand around the paper. "That's yours." Then Whitney turned to Kayla. The young woman had been standing a few feet back, still processing. Whitney walked over and stood close. 4 bars before the bridge," Whitney said softly. "The note doesn't start at the note. It starts when you decide you're not going to hold anything back. If you make that decision early and stay open, the breath finds the right place on its own. You have the voice. You just don't trust it yet. That's the only thing standing between you and where you want to be." Kayla's eyes were wet. She couldn't form words. "You'll get there," Whitney said, and she meant it. Outside on the sidewalk, the Atlanta air was still warm even past midnight. Whitney checked her phone. One message. From the house. She read it, and something in her face shifted. Brief, controlled. Bobby Christina. A situation that needed attention. Not an emergency, the message said. But not an emergency in a late-night text always means something is knocking on that door. She put the phone away. Gladys was watching her. "You okay?" "I will be," Whitney said, then quieter. "I need it tonight." They stood there for a moment, two women on a side street in Atlanta at midnight, the city moving softly around them. "Your voice," Gladys said finally, "or is not going anywhere." She said it the way you say something that isn't encouragement. The way you say something because it's simply true. Whitney looked up at the sky, exhaled. For the first time in 3 weeks, she didn't argue with it. Inside, Marcus was still standing where they'd left him. The note was in his jacket pocket. He stayed long after the chairs went up, thinking about the comfortable smile and how easy it had felt. He thought about Whitney Houston's handwriting and what she'd understood about music that he was only beginning to learn. The next night, before the open mic started, Marcus placed the folded note on top of the speaker beside the stage. Not to show anyone, just so he could see it. He kept it there every night after that. Months later, a grainy phone video surfaced on a music forum. 12 seconds, badly lit. Two women on a small stage, one clearly Gladys Knight. The other one, a commenter wrote, "Is that who I think it is?" Because that note is not something a human being should do in a room that size. It got a few thousand views and never went further. But every person inside the Velvet Room that night knew exactly what they'd witnessed. And Kayla Simmons, who performed at 3 Atlanta venues the following spring, and who began every sound check with the bridge of "Greatest Love of All," told anyone who asked that the most important vocal lessons she ever received happened at an open mic, past midnight, from a woman in a cap and an Old Navy choir jacket. She never said the name. She didn't have to. Have you ever felt the crushing weight of everyone's expectations pressing down on you, only to silence every single doubt with the one thing they couldn't take away? Tell us your story in the comments below.